So SLU-PP-332, we will just call it SLU from here on out, might be one of the most misunderstood compounds on the internet right now. Depending on who you listen to, it's either exercise in a bottle or something you should never touch. So instead of giving you another opinion, I pulled the original animal studies, compared them to 7 popular YouTube breakdowns, and laid everything side by side: mechanism, dosing, administration, and real-world use. At the end, I'll tell you exactly how I am approaching SLU and why. Before we talk about benefits, dosing, or safety, we need to place SLU into the correct category, because a lot of the confusion starts right here. Across nearly every source reviewed, there's broad agreement on a few core points. First, SLU is not a peptide, even though it's frequently labeled as one online. Peptides are chains of amino acids. SLU is a synthetic small molecule compound, and that distinction matters because small molecules behave very differently when it comes to absorption, distribution, and metabolism. Second, SLU was designed to activate a specific family of nuclear receptors called estrogen-related receptors, or ERRs, specifically ERR alpha, ERR beta, and ERR gamma. Despite the name, these receptors have nothing to do with estrogen levels or hormonal signaling. They're sometimes called orphan receptors and function as master regulators of cellular energy metabolism, particularly in tissues with high energy demand like skeletal muscle, the heart, and the liver. Because ERR alpha is one of the pathways naturally activated during endurance exercise, SLU is often grouped into a category people refer to as exercise mimetics. That's where the agreement mostly ends. Some sources treat that label cautiously, while others stretch it into something closer to an exercise replacement. But exercise activates hundreds of systems at once: mechanical load, nervous system signaling, bone density, immune modulation, growth factors, whereas SLU targets one metabolic axis. Based on the data, the most accurate category for SLU is this: a small molecule metabolic modulator that mimics select endurance exercise pathways, not a substitute for exercise itself. Once SLU is placed in the correct category, the next question becomes obvious: what does it actually do? Across the 7 sources reviewed, there's strong alignment on the intended effects of SLU. Most describe it as improving mitochondrial function, increasing fat oxidation, enhancing endurance, and improving metabolic efficiency. You'll hear phrases like exercise in a bottle or turning on endurance genes, and mechanistically, those claims are rooted in real biology. SLU activates ERR signaling, which increases mitochondrial biogenesis, shifts fuel usage toward fatty acids, improves oxidative metabolism, and raises overall energy expenditure. Where the conversation begins to fracture is in how far those effects are taken. Some sources frame as if it can significantly replace exercise. Others describe it more conservatively as a compound that amplifies training adaptations rather than substitutes for them. There's also disagreement about whether fat loss is a primary effect or a downstream consequence of improved metabolic efficiency. When you strip commentary away and look only at the published animal studies, here's what SLU has actually shown. In mice, it increased endurance performance by up to 70% and increased oxidative muscle fiber composition. It raised resting energy expenditure and shifted metabolism toward fat oxidation, even without changes in food intake or activity. In obese mouse models, it reduced fat mass gain, improved insulin sensitivity, lowered fasting glucose, and reduced fatty liver. It also showed protective effects in aging kidneys and improved outcomes in models of heart failure. What the data does not show is just as important. There are no human clinical trials, no validated performance outcomes in people, no long-term safety data, and no evidence that SLU reproduces the full systemic benefits of exercise. So, based on what we know, SLU appears to be a compound that enhances cellular energy production and fat utilization through mitochondrial pathways, impressive on paper, promising in animals, but unproven in humans. And once you understand what it's supposed to do, the next layer of confusion becomes unavoidable: how people are actually taking it. Quick pause. If you check the description, you won't see affiliate links, promo codes, or anything I'm trying to sell you.
I'm doing this because I genuinely believe people deserve better information about peptides, metabolic health, and longevity. If this content brings you value or helps you think differently about your health, please take a second to subscribe, like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, or drop a comment below. It really helps the channel grow, and it lets me keep making more of this content for you. Thank you.
This is where the SLU conversation becomes the most fragmented. Most sources agree on one fundamental issue. SLU is difficult to deliver consistently. It's a hydrophobic small molecule, meaning it doesn't dissolve well in water, and that single property complicates nearly every administration method people are using. Online, you'll see three main approaches: oral administration, injectable formulations, and transdermal or subdermal delivery using DMSO. Oral dosing is the most common because it's easy. The problem is bioavailability. Absorption can vary wildly based on bile production, dietary fat intake, gut physiology, and individual metabolism. Two people can take the same oral dose and absorb very different amounts, or almost none at all. That explains why oral reports are so mixed. Some people try to bypass this by injecting SLU. On paper, that makes sense, but SLU does not dissolve in bacteriostatic water. If it's not truly in solution, dosing becomes inconsistent and unpredictable. Every published animal study avoided this problem by using specialized solvent systems, typically DMSO combined with PEG or surfactants, not water-based injections. There's also a camp that supports transdermal or subdermal delivery using DMSO. Chemically, this can work because DMSO is a powerful penetration enhancer, but it introduces a different set of problems. Skin thickness, fat thickness, hydration, and blood flow vary widely between individuals, making dosing just as unpredictable as oral use. More importantly, DMSO doesn't just carry SLU, it can carry anything present on the skin surface into systemic circulation, including contaminants or residues. Another key reason dosing is so hard to compare is that in animal studies, dosing is extremely precise. Researchers dissolved SLU in appropriate solvents, diluted it carefully, and administered it under controlled conditions. That level of precision explains why the mouse data looks so clean, but that does not mean those methods should be replicated outside a laboratory setting. Even when dissolved in DMSO and diluted afterward, the compound can precipitate depending on concentration and solvent ratios, turning dosing back into guesswork. So the takeaway is this: regardless of the route, oral, injectable, or transdermal, delivery is inconsistent, dosing is uncertain, and real-world use doesn't match the conditions under which the data was generated. And once delivery and absorption become unpredictable, the next question becomes unavoidable. How do you even determine an appropriate dose when the studies and real-world use don't line up? Before we even talk numbers, this needs to be said clearly. There is no validated human dosing protocol for SLU-PP-332. No clinical trials, no pharmacokinetic studies, no agreed-upon oral bioavailability. Everything that follows is theoretical reasoning, not medical guidance. Now here's where things start to get confusing. In the animal studies, SLU was administered subcutaneously, not orally, at a dose of 50 milligrams per kilogram, twice daily. If you translate that directly to a human, weighing around 220 pounds, 100 kilograms, that would equal roughly 5,000 milligrams twice per day, delivered via injection, not through the digestive system. Some people attempt to match this rodent dosing by taking SLU orally, assuming they can replicate the effects seen in mice, but this is where assumptions start stacking on top of assumptions. There are no published studies confirming how much SLU actually survives digestion. You'll hear claims ranging anywhere from 45% absorption to as low as 10%. And to be clear, when I say you'll hear, that's exactly what I mean. These are claims, not validated data. But let's walk through the math anyway, not because it's correct, but because it highlights the problem. If we assume a 10% oral absorption rate, which is on the conservative side, and you wanted to replicate the 50 milligrams twice per day used in rodent studies, you would theoretically need to ingest 50,000 milligrams per day orally to end up with 5,000 milligrams systemically for a 200-pound person. That number alone should trigger a pause. Now, let's look at it from a more realistic angle. If someone took 5,000 milligrams orally twice per day, and only 10% actually made it through digestion, they'd be receiving about 500 milligrams twice per day systemically. Still an order of magnitude lower than the rodent equivalent dose, but far higher than what most people are actually taking. And this is where real-world use diverges sharply from theory. In practice, reported dosing ranges from a few hundred micrograms per day on the low end to 40, 60, or even 100 plus milligrams per day on the high end. That's not a narrow optimization window. That's a massive uncertainty gap. So when people ask, what's the right dose? The honest answer is, we don't know because we don't know. How much is absorbed orally? How much is destroyed in digestion? Whether oral dosing meaningfully replicates injected administration, or where the minimum effective human dose actually sits. That doesn't mean SLU does nothing. It means the dosing discussion is built on extrapolation, not confirmation. And that's the key takeaway here. This isn't about fine-tuning milligrams. It's about recognizing the limits of what the data can support. So after looking at the mechanism, the animal data, the administration challenges, and the dosing mismatch, the question becomes simple. How do I personally think about SLU? The science itself is interesting. The ERR pathway is real. The mitochondrial effects in animals are real, and the results in controlled mouse studies are legitimately impressive. But interest doesn't automatically equal action. Right now, there are no human clinical trials, no pharmacokinetic data, no long-term safety data, and no reliable way to know whether real-world dosing actually recreates what we see in animals. That said, SLU isn't unique in that respect. Many compounds people research exist in this same gray zone. For transparency, yes, I've personally been experimenting with SLU for about 4 weeks. I've used 20 milligram oral tablets, starting low, working up briefly to higher doses, and then backing off. I do believe I noticed an endurance effect. I can't confidently say there was a difference between 40 milligrams and 100 milligrams. I did feel slightly hungrier. Whether that's physiological or psychological, I can't say. I've spoken to people who swear by very high doses and others who feel nothing at micrograms. What I will not do is inject solvent-based formulations. I understand that's how rodent studies were done, but injecting DMSO is not a risk I'm willing to take. For now, my approach is simple. 20 milligrams orally, 30 to 60 minutes before training, and that's where I'm staying for now. So, did I answer everything for you? Maybe. Did I raise more questions than answers? Probably. And I'm okay with that. My goal here wasn't to sell you on SLU or scare you away from it. It was to take everything that's out there, the studies, the claims, the contradictions, and the personal experiments, and lay it all out side by side. What you heard today is the result of compiling information from multiple sources, comparing it against the published research, and separating what's known, what's assumed, and what's still speculation. Beyond sharing my own personal research approach, that's really all anyone can do at this stage. I genuinely enjoyed putting this together, and I think this investigative journalist-style breakdown is how I'll approach topics like this going forward. So let me know in the comments. Do you like this format? Do you want more deep dives like this? And if there's a compound, peptide, or topic you want me to break down next, drop it below. As always, if you found any value in this video and have not subscribed already, please do. It definitely helps. Hope to see you in the next one. Take care.